Es ist mir eine Ehre, ich habe das ja heute früh schon angekündigt, Scott Eberle zugeschaltet zu haben aus Kalifornien. Da ist es jetzt gerade 9:30 am Morgen. Scott ist vor uns gerade aufgestanden. Und Scott Eberle ist bekannt durch seine Arbeit zum Thema Tod und Sterben, auch weil er den Mann von Meredith Little, Stephen Foster, zusammen mit Meredith Little im Sterbeprozess begleitet hat. Und daraus hat die School of Lost Daughters, also Meredith und Scott, haben daraus Rituale für das Leben abgeleitet, die uns helfen, bewusster zu leben. Und in diesem Sinne wird auch der Vortrag von Scott heute sein. Denn er hat ein neues Buch geschrieben und will uns jetzt mit auf eine Reise nehmen.
Hello and welcome, Scott. We have the full audience now, and I spoke to everyone and said who you are. So if you want, you can start to talk to us. Welcome to the White Conference 2025, 2024.
Thank you so much, Hendrik. It's wonderful to be with you all. I'm just sorry I can't actually be physically in the room with you. This kind of talk would be so much better if we were able to be in physical presence. But this is the world we live in now. We do so many things by video. So what I thought I'd do is first, I know you got a brief introduction about me, but I'm going to offer just a little bit of my background to explain where I'm going to go in the next hour. And hopefully we'll have a chance for questions and comments afterwards. But to start, I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see. Hopefully you can see that okay. I have a new book that just came out about a month or two ago. I'll say more about my previous book that might have been mentioned in the introduction. The new one is The Soul's Red Thread, Memoirs of a Guide. And to help explain where this book comes from, I want to, again, just give a little bit of a description of who I've been in this lifetime of mine. I'm now 67 years old. The Soul's Red Thread tells the story of going from age 17 to 67. And this is me a long time ago. I was maybe 30 years old. I was a young physician in training. I was working in the Bay Area in the middle of the AIDS epidemic. And just because of circumstances, place, and time, I was at the bedside of many, many people who died. I, in time, became an AIDS physician and then a hospice physician, which, as I'm sure you can imagine, was very difficult, very exhausting, very challenging work, such that 13 years into doing that work, I went out and did my very first School of Lost Borders wilderness fast. This was a 4 days, no food, no four-walled shelter, no human company, the classic rite of passage ceremony that the School of Lost Borders offers. And this picture is actually taken at the very spot where I sat for 4 days and 4 nights back at the beginning of the new year in 2000. And that then began my journey to becoming a wilderness guide myself. I have now been a rite of passage guide at the School of Lost Borders for 22 years, and it's become my greatest life passion. I actually retired, left behind my work as a hospice physician a year and a half ago because this is really where my, like I say, my great life passion has been. But going back in time, 2000, 2003, starting to do wilderness guiding, and then actually seeing how the rite of passage of being with someone dying at the bedside was so similar to the rite of passage of people going through a symbolic death and rebirth ceremony in the desert. And that led to, I'll jump ahead of that. That led to my first book that came out about 15 years ago, The Final Crossing, Learning to Die in Order to Live. And this was actually translated into German. I'll be honest, I was never very pleased with the title that the publisher gave the new version. It's the same book, just slightly different title. So anyway, this is 15 years ago. And when I first finished and put the final processing out into the world, for the first year or two, I was so exhausted from writing, I just let it go. But then soon after, I began to ask myself, what do I want to write next? And the working title of my new book, way back when, this is a long time ago, the working title was The Red Thread of Story. And I want to read you a poem, which was actually the inspiration for that title. It's a very famous poem by the American poet William Stafford. It's called The Way It Is. The way it is. There's a thread you follow. It goes among things that change, but it doesn't change. People wonder about what you're pursuing, but you have to explain, pardon me. People wonder about what you are pursuing. You have to explain about the thread, but it's hard for others to see. While you hold the thread, you can't get lost. Tragedies happen, people get hurt or die, and you suffer and get old. Nothing you can do will stop time's unfolding. You don't ever let go of the thread. So again, this was the inspiration for a lot of thinking and reading and researching. And at the heart of it all was the simple question, why do humans tell stories? And the Stafford poem was pointed me in the very direction of where I thought the answer would lie. And so I want to just give you one of the most basic lessons that came out of all the research and all the writing. And that is when human beings have a big experience, something that's really huge, life-transforming experience, we immediately turn that into memory, immediately. And then that memory starts to inform the stories that we tell about what happened. And when the stories and the experience are truly life-changing, those stories then shape our identity. And for me, this is at the heart of the answer to the question, why do we humans tell stories? We tell stories, to borrow again from the Stafford poem. You have to explain about the thread. It's hard for others to see. And the way that we both claim and name the thread of our own life, as well as the way in which we go ahead and communicate that to other people, is through the telling of stories. So many years into thinking about and researching and writing, I changed the title of the book from the Red Thread of Story to The Soul's Red Thread, because what became more and more clear for me is this life thread that Stafford speaks about is really an expression of our soul, our true self, our inner self. Jung would call it the self. And this is what I was tracking. And in the early years of writing this book, I had this great idea that I was going to have wonderfully wise and bright and intelligent things to say about story. But I also understood that in order to make this come alive, I would need to tell stories. And my hope in this hour is I'll do some storytelling for all of you to bring this alive. But what ended up becoming the biggest feedback I got from numbers of people was that what I was writing, when I would go to what I called the professor's voice, the material would get stuck and too intellectual. But when I told stories, that was when it came alive. And so the great task of all the rewriting I've done over the last few years was to get all of those, what I hope were wise and intelligent things to say about why humans tell stories, to actually get those lessons and learnings embedded into the actual telling of story. So that has been the great task of these last years. And so even though I began not in any way wanting to write an autobiography, what this ended up becoming was memoirs, the memoirs of a guide. So The Soul's Red Thread, Memoirs of a Guide. So I want to just read you a short, first of a couple of excerpts from the book, just a very short piece. It's towards the very beginning of the book, at the end of the introduction. I write to the reader, if you're willing, come with me as I follow the soul's red thread, retracing this life journey of mine. Along the way, I will look to offer more than just one person's story. I want to speak about universal themes, about why humans tell stories, about the identity each person creates with that storytelling, and about a life thread moving through. And so I close this introduction with the simple question. Pardon me. I close the introduction with the question, so what about you, reader? What are the strands of your own life thread? And what are their colors? I actually, in the introduction, explain how, for me, my own life thread is a red thread. But I'm here to say, I actually did a wilderness program a week or two ago, and at the very end, everyone actually was given the freedom to choose a thread that would represent their own, what they had been following in their own life, a thread. And many people chose red, many people, all kinds of different colors. But the important question here to you all is, what is this thread in your own life you're following? What really is your great life passion? What informs your deepest calling, your deepest searchings in this lifetime? Let's see, where do we go from here? The life great passages. The Soul's Red Thread has 12 chapters in 3 different sections, 4 chapters each section. And in each of them, I follow the life course of my own story through 3 major rites of passage: coming of age, what the Jungian author James Hollis calls the middle passage, and then the elder passage. And to this list, I would add, and it's not a topic in this particular book, the 4th major life passage we all go through is, of course, our own dying, the final crossing. And that was very much the theme of my first book. But for here in this hour and in this book, what I want to focus on is the first 3 life passages. And if any of you have done any reading or are in any way familiar with the School of Lost Borders work, you'll know exactly where I'm going for the next couple of slides. 3 phases of any rite of passage: coming of age, the middle passage, the elder passage, and dying as well. 3 phases, and this comes from the anthropologist Arnold van Gennep. In his French, he gave three names, which I'm going to translate to English here: separation, also sometimes called severance; transition, sometimes called the threshold time; and then incorporation, the coming into the new phase of life. And for me, as an old hospice physician, the language I like to use when thinking about the 3 phases of a rite of passage is dying to the old phase of life, being in between, and being reborn into the new phase. And it's worth saying here that when we complete an old life phase, so for example, using the passage, when someone goes out into the world, they don't suddenly become an adult overnight. There's a long, long time of being in between, of not quite being the old story, the old name, not quite yet the new story, the new name. And so that in-between phase in a rite of passage is often very difficult, but really an important one to know and navigate well. So at the heart of any rite of passage is a core question. And I'm going to revisit this question as we move through the different life passages to come. And that question is this: if I let go to what no longer serves, if I really truly die to my old way of being, what's waiting for me on the other side? And I'm called to say that oftentimes there's an enormous amount of fear in that in-between phase of, do I really want to let go of what I'm become truly comfortable with? But the truth is, if you don't let go of what no longer serves, you won't discover what's waiting for you on the other side. So at its heart, a rite of passage is dying practice. We're learning how to die to what no longer serves. And a lot of the work out in the desert of California, a lot of the work the School of Lost Borders does is to invite people to learn how to die symbolically to a phase of life, to an old story, an old name that no longer serves, so that they can truly embrace and take on what's their more authentic storyline might be. And this is why that the William Stafford poem was so inspirational for me, is that what we're doing at the School of Lost Borders is effectively asking people, what's your life thread? What are you really passionate about? If you were really truly going to show up for what means most to you in this life, where would that life thread take you? And so I'm also called to say it's dying practice that's wonderful preparation for the physical dying to come. And having sat at the bedside of hundreds of people over many years who were physically dying, I'm here to say that some people prepare for that well, and some people don't prepare so well at all. And I'm calling in here a medieval prayer that I actually have on the title page of the Final Crossing. It comes in two parts, and I'm only going to give you the first part to start, and we'll revisit on the whole prayer later on toward the end of the talk. So the first part: to be blessed in life, one must learn to die. And that's exactly at the core of what this the Soul's Red Thread is all about. If we're really going to go ahead and show up to our life in the fullest way possible, are we willing to learn how to die to what doesn't serve, and understand that kind of dying and being reborn, if we want to really come alive, it's an ongoing life practice. I just had come to mind, for those of you who ever listened to Bob Dylan, one of his most famous lines, this is from the song, "It's All Right, Ma, I'm Only Bleeding." He says at one point, "Those not busy being born are busy dying," which is to say, if we don't continually do the rites of passage, transformational work of dying to what no longer serves, to be reborn, then we will truly die in this lifetime. We'll become stuck. We'll become someone who never really fully grows and steps into what life is asking of us. So 4 major life passages. And actually, I think I'm only going to cover the first 3 in this talk. And they're the 3 that's in the Soul's Red Thread. So beginning with the first of these major life passages, coming of age. As I said earlier, coming of age is kind of the quintessential rite of passage. There's probably more literature in this world written about coming of age than any other life passage we humans navigate. And here I'm going to borrow from, again, I mentioned earlier, James Hollis, the Jungian writer. I'm going to read from a portion of his book in which he only briefly in the book talks about coming of age. He mostly focuses on the middle passage. But here he is. This is James Hollis. Coming of age has as its primary task the solidification of the ego, through which the youth gains sufficient strength to leave parents, go out into the larger world, and struggle for survival. Such a person has to say to the world, hire me, marry me, trust me, and then prove worthy. So here in this beautiful, just couple of sentences, Hollis names exactly what the great challenge is of coming of age, of moving from being, again, a dependent living in our parents' home to being an adult out in the world. And very much the focus, the relational axis, he calls it, the focus of coming of age is our relationship of ourself, our ego, to the world at large. How do we find work? How do we find a relationship and all of that? And so that question I posed earlier, when a child is growing up and looking to come of age, are they willing to let go of what no longer serves, which in this case is being totally dependent on parents? And are they willing to see what's waiting for them on the other side out in the world? And so in the language of James Hollis, first adulthood, and there's going to be a second adulthood coming in just a little bit, but in first adulthood, the focus is on, again, finding work, hire me, finding relationship, marry me, finding family and community, trust me, and then proving yourself worthy. I call to mind the Beatles song, Long and Winding Road, to say that this coming of age, this moving through adolescence into the first adulthood is not, again, something that happens quickly and overnight. Actually, Hollis offers up one definition of adolescence, which has it lasting from puberty around the age of 12 all the way to the age of 28. And actually, 28 is an awfully arbitrary age, and I would submit that there are plenty of people out there who are much older than 28 who haven't really fully come into their adulthood. But what I find useful about this definition is to remind us that coming of age doesn't happen overnight. It's a real great challenge. And it calls to mind a research phenomenon called the memory bump, in which when people, especially later in life, much later in life, look back on all the biggest memories of their lifetime, a disproportionate number of memories that really stick are from age 15 to 30. This is one definition of the memory bump, which I find fascinating. That's almost exactly the same period of time as adolescence. And I believe that the reason why there's this memory bump, why we remember so well our first love, our first job, our first really huge experience out in the natural world, whatever it might be, all those really big early life experiences are hugely important in that very first shaping of our own life identity. I said earlier, why do we humans tell stories? We tell stories to create an identity. And never is that task more difficult, more challenging, and more important than when, as an adolescent, we are first really beginning to take shape and name who we are in the world. And then just to personalize this a little bit, I'm not going to say too much here, but my own coming of age, again, back when I was 30 years old, so right at the end of adolescence, I was now just becoming a young physician in the world, because of circumstance, becoming an AIDS physician. This actually, the fellow you see there, I show this picture with the permission of his mother. He's long since died. His name is Bill. I won't say his last name, but Bill was the very first person who was dying in their own home that I went to visit when I was still a physician in training. And so what was very odd about my own coming of age is here I was at a very young age called to sit at the bedside of people making the very last major rite of passage, the final crossing, physically dying. And so for me, my own identity was completely shaped by all the hundreds of people who I sat with as they were dying. And at the core of that experience was, I didn't know it at the time because I didn't have words or the conception yet, but it was the understanding that all the major events in a human life are rites of passage. So you have to explain about the thread, William Stafford says, but it's hard for others to see. And it was hard for me to see at that time just where this all was heading. But I was just beginning at the age of 30, just beginning to find what this life thread of my own was that I'd be following. So that's coming of age. And now let's talk about the middle passage. And again, I'm going to borrow from James Hollis to start this section. Actually, before I read a quote from Hollis about the middle passage, a little story. Many years ago, this is probably about 10 years ago, I was out in the desert. I was actually remember very clearly where I was. It was Red Amphitheater in Death Valley, and I was leading a program. And one of the people there, who was a friend of mine, was in the middle of doing the Jungian Institute training in San Francisco. And she came to me at one point during the week and said, Scott, the work you're doing here, what you are doing with all these people, this is guiding people through the middle passage. You have to read James Hollis's book. And so, sure enough, when I got a hold of the James Hollis book, I was blown away. He was putting into words the very work that's at the core of what the School of Lost Borders does. Mind you, the school does do some coming of age rites of passage with young adults, but the vast majority of people who come to the school's programs are people typically at least in their 30s, sometimes in their 20s, but more likely 30s, 40s, 50s, and some people who come to the middle passage late in life in their 60s or 70s. And so here, let me read to you something from James Hollis about the middle passage. The next phase of identity, the middle passage, is launched when your projections onto others and onto institutions start to dissolve. The sense of betrayal, of failed expectations, the vacuum and loss of meaning which occur with this dissolution, all this creates a midlife crisis. It's in this crisis, however, that one has the chance to become an individual. Beyond the determinism of parents, beyond parent complexes, and beyond cultural conditioning. This is the middle passage. This is what takes us into what Hollis calls the second adulthood. And so again, I ask the same question as before. If that person in a midlife crisis is willing to let go of what no longer serves, as he says, all the projections onto others and onto institutions, what's waiting for that person on the other side? And according to Hollis, if you're willing to make that deep dive, what's waiting in second adulthood is a deeper relationship with the soul or the true self. The idea, again, is if in first adulthood, it's all about ego and relationship to the world, about job and family and relationship. And now, as we get deeper into middle life, middle passage, it's really about who is the true self that is inside of me. What's my soul calling me to do? And of course, this calls very much to mind William Stafford's poem about the life thread that each person is looking to follow, or in my case, what I call the soul's red thread. So I say again, the middle passage is really about deepening connection with one's true self. So I want to go ahead and actually read you another passage from my book. Hang on a sec. Let's see. Yeah. So to explain this one, a little bit of background first. What I want to do, the reason I chose this particular passage is I want to say something about what are the kinds of ways in which people navigate the middle passage. And I've already said it pretty clearly, the School of Lost Borders and the work we do is a very particular way to do that. But it's not the only way, of course. So in this particular chapter, I'm out in Death Valley again. I'm out co-guiding a program with a friend of mine, a woman named Zoe. Earlier in this chapter, much earlier at the very beginning of the chapter, my mother dies. And this is about 4 years ago. My mother died when she was 91. I had a wonderful, wonderful relationship with my mother. And so when she died, it was really quite devastating, but in a wonderful way as well, because I had so much love for her that I was able to carry her forward in a really beautiful way. However, after my mother died, I found myself falling into a hole of, oh my God, if my mother can die, anyone can die. And as a hospice doc, I dealt with mortality and watching people die many, many times. But this was new. It was as if, oh no, this isn't other people, patients, people I take care of. These are the people I love. These are all the most important people that really matter to me are going to die someday. This is a core Buddhist teaching. Can you really take on the truth that everyone that matters to you is going to die? And so I actually, for months, in a way I'd never done in my life, I fell into, I wasn't depressed, but I would definitely despair a lot. And in particular, in the middle of the night, I'd wake up and be up for a couple of hours. And this was the major theme of that perseveration. A little bit more backstory to set up what I'm going to read. Very early in the book, I talk about experiences I had had in my 20s with psilocybin and LSD, each of which, not all, but several of which were total disasters. The typical 22-year-old twit going ahead and dropping acid with friends with no guide, no structure, no decent holding, and I would just absolutely lose it. And so very early in my life, at the age of about 23 or 4, I told myself, never again, I'm done. And that actually then became part of what led me to the Vision Fast work of the school and long, deep meditation retreats, because I wanted to have a way of doing the middle passage work in a way that was much more controllable, much more stable, and that's something I could trust. So anyways, here I am, years later, 40 plus years later. And some of you probably have heard of Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind, which I had read a year or two prior. And in it, he talks about research, psilocybin research with people with end-of-life, life-threatening illness, people who are dying, using psilocybin as a way to really take on existential angst. And so in this chapter, I'm just beginning to contemplate, maybe, just maybe, I'll do a guided, really important to say that, a guided medicine journey as a way to deal with this despair that I was struggling with. So with that as an introduction, let me read to you from this chapter. Again, I'm out in Death Valley, as I mentioned. After feeding myself lunch, I decided to go for a long walk. The first step seemed mindless enough until I realized that I was heading toward the ridgetop solo spot of my very first vision fast. While I walked across a wide wash and then up toward the ridge, I considered the greater timeline of my own personal story. In 1958, when I was a year old, Albert Hoffman isolated psilocybin and psilocin. 2 decades later, at 21, I had the life-altering insight overlooking Long Lake, something I described earlier in the book. Just over 2 decades after that, at 43, I did my first vision fast here in Hanapa Canyon in Death Valley. And now 2 decades further on, at 64, I was back here at Hanapa, sitting at the very spot of my first vision fast. It then came to me. The great arc of my life has landed me right here. When I reached the site of my old purpose circle, the midday sun was hanging high in the sky. I sat down facing east, looking across the salt flats of Badwater, sparkling jewels against the dark backdrop of the funeral mountains. The once sublime desert morning had turned into a hot, hot day, hottest of the week, though this felt just right. Baking in the desert heat was a way to relax into all that had brought me to this moment. The Long Lake Epiphany, my first solo fast in the desert, the people now fasting in the canyon, this day with Zoe in Poland's book. A great aha then came bubbling up. A well-held psychedelic journey is like a well-guided desert fast, is like a well-taught meditation retreat, is like a well-supported death. Each of these I saw so clearly is an invitation to shine a beacon down into the darkly splendid world of the unconscious, a chance to do transformational work of the deepest kind, an opportunity to live life more honestly, more fully, an invitation to make death your final offering to life. This is the thread I've been following, I thought to myself. This is the soul's red thread. I continued to bake for another hour, taking in the immensity of the view inside and out. So I know you in this conference this week, you all are looking at different ways, different technologies, particularly out in the natural world, but just what are the ways in which we might do deep transformational work? I love, I'll be honest, my favorite line of this whole book, I'll read it again. I just, it's an invitation to shine a beacon down into the darkly splendid world of the unconscious. And I'll say, as I also in that passage, for me, rites of passage work of any kind, all the psychedelic journey, the desert fast, the meditation retreat, going into therapy with a Jungian and doing dream work, all kinds of different ways. All of those are dying practice. And the more we do this kind of dying practice work, the more we will be prepared for our own physical dying. Rites of passage work is dying practice. So that's all. That's the middle passage. Let's talk a little bit about the elder passage, and I'll read one more short excerpt from the book. So again, borrowing from James Hollis to enter the theme of the elder passage. By the way, I'm 67 years old. I just retired as a hospice doc, though I continue to be full on doing wilderness work and one-on-one rites of passage counseling work. But for me, I'm now at a stage of life where I do things because it's truly 100% about following my own life thread. And it's a great blessing, frankly, being financially at least a little bit solvent, not rich by any means, but it's allowed me to enter the elder years really, truly tracking what is it that matters most to me in my life. So let's listen to James Hollis for a minute here. Whoops. The last relational axis, again, beyond ego world and beyond ego in relationship to soul, the last relational axis is self in relationship to God, or self in relationship to the cosmos, if you prefer. This axis is framed by the cosmic mystery, which transcends the mystery of individual incarnation. Without some relationship to the cosmic drama, we are constrained to live lives of transience, superficiality, and aridity. So this is the great calling of the elder passage. How can we take on something about that really takes in the truth that we are going to die, and that whatever we've been following, whatever we've been creating, whatever we've been truly connected to and attached to, all of it is going to disappear. And what do you do with that kind of information as you enter these final years? So again, at the core of any rite of passage, and it's also true here, is the question, if I let go to what no longer serves, what's waiting for me on the other side? And here I want to make a distinction. I'm not talking about the final crossing here. I'm not talking about the work someone needs to do when they can actually see that death is coming in the days or weeks to come. But here I am, 67 years old. I'm in pretty good health. I could live for 30 more years. I could live for 3 more days. Who knows? And how do you live with that kind of uncertainty? And so the answer to the question of what's waiting for me on the other side, for me, it's all about learning how to let go and learning how to trust. And so with that, as an intro, I'm going to read you one more passage from the book. Let's see. So to set this up, Marin Headlands. If you know where the Golden Gate Bridge is, San Francisco, on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge is the Marin Headlands. And so I'm hiking on just across the San Francisco Bay, and with San Francisco fully in view. And we're on a hiking trail that at times has an incredible view of San Francisco, but then it turns facing west and goes directly towards the ocean. And on this particular day, there's a huge fog bank about a mile off the coastline that's billowing in. And so that's the scene that from which I'm going to read. So you were speaking earlier about the last great hurrah, says Zoe. What do you imagine is waiting up ahead for you? Good question, I answered. I've been asking myself that all week. Even though my medical career is ended, I'm not done engaging with the world. Far from it. Now it's all about wilderness guiding and one-on-one counseling and mirroring. But here's the big difference. For so long, my identity has been tied up in stories I would tell to others and to myself. Stories about who I am and what I do. I'm a doctor. I'm a wilderness guide. I'm a student of Buddhism. But something now has shifted. The core of who I am is no longer about doing or speaking or storytelling, and certainly not about giving myself names or roles. It's all about essence. It's about the embodiment of essence. And, Zoe said, as I've heard you say, that's all about embodying love. That's right, I answered. It's all about passing on my mother's love. That's been my own life thread. It sounds so trite, so obvious, but isn't that always the way with life's biggest insights? If you speak out some great truth, it sounds so banal. All you need is love, or some such thing. A great truth only comes alive when first you feel it deep inside, and then you find ways, even just small ways, to bring it out into the world. That means learning to live from the inside out. And my version of is learning to love others by first loving myself. And that starts with loving the wounded little boy inside. I looked ahead at the blue Pacific before us. The fog was a mile or so out, though tonight it was sure to come billowing in. Let me turn this back on. So yeah, it's all about love and it's all about trust. The great challenge of getting older is learning to trust just as it is, life just as it is. Zoe, you and I have only so much time left in this world. The last shroud of death will be rolling in soon. It's why the omen of Chloe tearing up the owl's wing has seemed so perfect. If I'm going to learn how to die, I'm going to need to learn how to let go. Letting go of the owl's wing is simple enough. Soon enough, though, I'll be letting go of Chloe and likely Oliver. And the big one, of course, losing Bill. All that means learning how to trust. No small task, Zoe said. May it be so. Well, what else is there to do but trust the ceremony of my own life. So yeah, for me, at this stage of life, it's all about learning to trust the ceremony of my own life, learning that whether I get 3 days or 30 years, that I simply show up with as full-hearted and open-hearted a way as possible for the one-on-one clients sitting in front of me, to a circle of people out into the desert, to all my dearest friends. And here I'm going to bring back that medieval prayer that I offered earlier and give you the part 2 of it. So part 1, to be blessed in life, one must learn to die. One must learn to symbolically die to step into each new phase of life. Well, part 2 is to be blessed in death, you must learn to live. And for me, that means learn to trust, learn to live with as open a heart as possible, and show up as fully present as I can with each moment. So I'm going to open to questions in a moment. Before I do, though, I'll just say to you all, I do one-on-one rites of passage counseling work, and I actually have, right at the moment, I have about 3 different people in Germany who I do one-on-one work with. And what I do is I invite people to go out and do day walks on their own, obviously, since we're doing this by Zoom, and do the kind of work the School of Lost Borders does, but from a distance. And then I'll also just invite you to visit my website if you're at all interested in getting a copy of The Soul's Red Thread or The Final Crossing. Though I have to warn you, I can't believe how expensive it is to ship a book overseas. I haven't done it yet, but I'm hoping to get the Kindle version up and running shortly. But anyway, thank you all so much for listening. I really invite your comments, your questions. Where does this all take you? I really just can't thank you enough for your patience and your showing up tonight. I can't. I'm not hearing anything right at the moment. If anyone's talking, oh, there we go. Now I can.
Thank you for everything. Thank you for your panel. And now we have some time for questions. If there's anyone who want to ask something, this is the place to talk with Scott. It's your time.
Questions or comments? Where does this take you? What about your own experience with rites of passage, with dying symbolically or physically? Where do you go with all this? Please. Thank you. Please be so bold.
Hey, Scott, can you hear me? Scott?
I can, please, go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm Karina, and I read The Final Crossing 10 or more times. Thank you for this book. It really changed my life. And I have a question to you. I'm doing rites of passage with children and youth. And I know about your work and about the practice of living and dying. So my question is, what is your advice? What is your lesson to young people today facing the present challenges, facing war, facing climate change? What are your words for young children to empower them?
That was a wonderful question. What to say? The version of how to go ahead and navigate difficult change, difficult circumstances when you're 25 years old as opposed to when you're 67 years old, it's not the same. And the passion and I'll dare I say the passionate anger that a younger person can bring to participating in a changing world in as full-throated and full-hearted a way as possible it's so incredibly important in this time. So I think the biggest thing, my version at 67 of showing up and being fully present in my life is very different than when I was a young AIDS physician. I often described myself back then as being an angry young man. I was so angry and furious about what I saw going on, the AIDS phobia and the ways in which people were being badly treated. And that became the fuel with which I actually stepped as passionately into my work as I could. I'll say, though, in time, what became more and more clear to me is that anger couldn't be the only source of fuel, the only way to go ahead and do the work. That more and more I needed to develop and cultivate love and compassion as being what really guided me. And so I suppose my answer to your question is don't be afraid to be angry and passionate and really get involved. And know that if we can't source our desire to support healthy change in the world from love and compassion, we may become as much a part of the problem as we are part of the solution. So yeah, absolutely. Fight for change. Show up and be the agent of change in the world, and bring as much love and compassion as you can to that work.
Wollen wir es da einfach schließen? Yes? Okay. Hey, Scott, I think we had a long day today, so thank you for your time, and hopefully we can read the book maybe also in German in the future. Do you plan?
I don't have immediate plans, but who knows? It wasn't even my idea with the Final Crossing years before, but hopefully we'll see.
Okay. So then, thank you for your time, and have a nice day.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you all.